Erin woke up with a pounding headache. Far worse than she had expected, even after she had dragged herself into the bed of this cheap motel room hours past midnight. She could feel every single beat of her heart up in her head, and the whole inside of her mouth seemed to be filled with cotton. "Jesus Christ," she hissed as she got up and into a sitting position and could see the world spinning for a moment. What a bad idea it had been. Going out in her current mental state and cutting loose had really been the worst thing she could have done. Well, not the absolute worst. She looked over to the other side of the bed and caught a glimpse of the guy lying there. He didn't seem too bad. She had brought back worse. Judging by the clothing strewn all over the floor, he definitely wasn't homeless. And as far as she could see, he even had all of his teeth. That definitely was an upgrade. She could kick him out later, Erin promised herself, and got up to stagger to the bathroom. These nights were becoming too much for her. Well, not the nights themselves, rather the mornings after were the true problem. She had to brush her teeth twice to get the taste out of her mouth, then hopped in the shower to get the sweat and grime off her skin. The water pressure wasn't really what one would hope for, but Erin now found herself unable to concentrate on that. Beneath the noise of the running water, she could hear the guy in the other room starting to move. She closed her eyes and tried to listen. He had gotten up from the bed and now was walking around the room, picking up items of clothing. With a bit of luck, he would just disappear out of the front door before she could finish her shower. And that would be that. Another one-night stand, and this time she couldn't even remember his name. She almost smiled to herself, then stopped as she heard the guy opening the door to the bathroom. Erin thought about shouting at him to stay out, but kept her mouth shut in the end and just turned around. It wasn't like the man hadn't seen it all anyway already, and who was she to keep him away from a sink and a toilet after a night like that? Better she let him be here than him vomiting on the floor beside the bed. She could hear him chuckling as he entered the room, but didn't turn around to face him. Like that, she could keep a tiny modicum of privacy at least. The man went to the toilet, then the sink, but even though she waited for it, he didn't leave. "Everything okay?" Erin asked after what felt like an eternity had passed and turned her head back to look at him. Well, he wasn't watching her at least, she found out. The man was looking at a piece of paper in his hand while standing with his back propped against the wall. "So, when do we leave?" Erin shook her head in disbelief. What was he talking about? Had she promised something last night? A life together? No, that was impossible. No matter how drunk she got, that was something she would never promise anyone. What the fuck are you talking about? It was the only thing she could think of right now. But something in her mind stirred. A memory buried deep beneath the booze and music, the smell of sweat and smoke from last night. "Superstition," the man replied. And suddenly, Erin felt a chill running down her spine. That word, it was something she had heard a lot yesterday. Part of her wanted to simply wave it off and tell the guy to leave, but the strange voice inside her mind kept her from speaking. There had been a drunk yesterday. One she had talked to for what felt like an hour. One who had shown her something. A rock, glimmering in the low light of the bar. She groaned and put her face directly beneath the shower head. The water was already turning cold, but right now, Erin didn't mind at all. It seemed to be clearing her head. Superstition. That was the unofficial name of the mountain in the west of this tiny little roadside town. The one where the old drunk had found the gold. She had talked to quite a few people last night, including the guy now standing next to her shower, waiting for her to finish it. There were rumors going around about people finding gold there. Lots of it. It wasn't legal, strictly speaking. The place was off limits after all, at least to normal people. But the old drunk guy had simply driven halfway up the mountain and, according to his own tales, had found this chunk not even 2 minutes after getting there. Erin had spent the rest of the night looking for more information. There were different stories as well, she had found. People who had gone up there and never returned. Well, not alive, at least. And their bodies, according to those legends, if they were found at all, were headless. Some of the people she had talked to had told her that it was the natives protecting their land, while others had claimed it was all the work of a curse or ghosts or the like. Erin shook her head, then turned around to face the man. Yeah, that had been the reason she had picked this guy. He had a truck and had seemed excited to join her. And even though she now felt a sliver of hesitation, Erin smiled at him, turned off the shower, and reached for a towel. Just a few minutes. We can get coffee on the go, right? He finally looked at her and nodded. Not even 20 minutes later, they were in the guy's truck out on the road. The man was called Benjamin, Erin found out after the first awkward silence, and he, contrary to her, had stayed mostly sober last night. She didn't mind that at all. It gave her time to rest, which was definitely needed, while the guy drove him up there. After rummaging around in her purse, she'd even found the napkin where the old man had drawn her a map, which Benjamin now held onto. She closed her eyes and listened to the noise of the car. The radio was turned off, and the man driving didn't talk at all. He was completely focused on trying to find the right off-ramp, which gave her enough time to try and remember last night. The hot and sticky air inside the first pub, it had smelled of cheap liquor, tobacco and sweat. She had entered it, walked to the bar, and sat down, as she always liked to do. The drinks had flowed, she had laughed and talked and flirted with one guy or another, until this old man had sat down next to her. At first, she had thought he was trying to pick her up, and Erin had played along. Usually, she got a few drinks out of people like that before changing either the seat or leaving entirely. But the story he had told had drawn her in. Part of it was probably the fact that the guy had looked just like she had always imagined those prospectors had. White, unkempt hair, a glimmer in the eyes, rough and calloused hands. He had told her about himself, and Erin hadn't really listened. Those stories always bored her to death, and she hadn't even been drunk enough to pretend to care. The only thing the guy had done that had caught her attention was producing this glimmering stone. He had even let her hold it for a few seconds. It had been far heavier than she had imagined, and the texture, together with the glow in the weak light, had told her that the man hadn't lied when he had explained to her what it was and where he had found it. The rest of the conversation was a blur. He had bought her drinks, and she had finally pretended to be interested. At least, until he had given her a napkin with the roads leading up there. Once she had gotten that, Erin had disappeared. First to the toilet, then out of the bar. Superstition. What a strange name for a mountain. The locals she had met at the other place had told her the rest of the stories. About the natives, the ghosts, and even one guy who had pretended to be a scientist who had said something about an alien site up there. Erin chuckled to herself. She didn't care about the rumors. All she wanted, all she needed, was a bit of cash. Just enough to get her through the next few months before her new side project would finally bear fruit. She opened her eyes, took a sip of her coffee, as she watched the road signs fly by. The man next to her seemed a bit more relaxed than in the morning. He was looking out at the road signs as well, and sometimes shook his head. "What a great treasure map, huh?" Erin chimed in, and could see him grinning as well. "Not gonna be a problem," was his answer. She shot him a glance, then looked at the napkin on his leg. Even now, she could hardly make out any of the words. There were lines drawn crossing each other, each one symbolizing a different dirt road with even stranger names. She couldn't make heads or tails of any of them, but Benjamin seemed to read them just fine. It had been a great idea to invite him along. If the place was even half as lucrative as the old man had claimed, they would both make out like bandits. There should be no reason for this to turn ugly once it came to splitting the profits. And if there was, well, it wasn't her first rodeo, Erin reminded herself and pulled her purse closer. She could feel the small revolver in there through the fabric. Enough to stop someone like the guy sitting next to her. She calmed herself, then put on a bright smile. Sometimes opportunities just came along, her dad always used to say, and she would definitely grab hold of each and every one of them. The sign of a roadside diner passed them by, and Erin could see the man smiling while his fingers pointed right at the corner of the napkin. There was the name. Whisk and Whimsy. What a dumb name, she thought, but kept it to herself. She looked away from the side of the road and toward the mountain that already seemingly towered above them. The few clouds in the sky were drawing their shadows on the slopes as they passed by the sun, and it made them look like giant figures running along the mountainside. Erin got a chill and took a deep breath. Just one of the side effects of last night, she tried to calm herself, but felt this strange atmosphere now in the car. There was a tension in the air she couldn't quite put her finger on. Something about it all made her nervous. As she'd said before, this wasn't her first rodeo, and usually she trusted her gut feeling, which now told her nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. She looked over at the guy and tried to remember as much as she could about him. They'd met sometime after midnight at the second bar. He had looked useful and had played along with her advances just fine. But now she was wondering if he had come with her because of the story. He hadn't seemed overly interested in her at all, if she recalled it now. Maybe that was the reason for this tension. Him being here because of greed. Someone like that could stab her in the back any time. Erin put out her hand and pulled the napkin to herself. She followed the line she thought represented the street they were on right now, then looked up again. There should be a left soon, right after the red barn. She told him, and he nodded. Hardly anything was out here. No people could be seen. Only the mountains seemed to tower over them, blocking the sky and turning its color into a darker shade of blue. No wonder the people who had lived here for ages believed that there was something strange going on up there. If she didn't know any better, she would have thought so as well. Somehow, this monstrosity seemed to swallow the light of the sun. A barn with a red paint job appeared ahead, and Erin felt the car slowing down, then driving onto the road leading off to the side. They made their way along the streets and back roads, turning off one and then onto the next every few miles. But to her amazement, they never lost their way, never had to turn back around again, and never even as much as stopped to study this map closely. It was far better, far more effective than she had imagined. After another hour of slowly driving up the mountain, they finally got to the one point the old drunk guy had made especially clear would be coming. An old, rusted gate behind a fenced-off piece of land. Erin looked out through the front window and could see the big chain hanging there. Some of the links were cut, and the lock was only there for show. Was that something the old man had done? If he had come up the same way, he would have encountered this gate as well, right? She looked over at Benjamin, who in turn was looking at her. "Can you open the gate?" he asked, but Erin immediately shook her head. She would not get out of the car on her own. Not because she was scared of anything out there, but because it would be the perfect chance for the guy to simply leave her stranded. "Let's do that together," she replied, and watched him closely for any sign of annoyance. But the man just shrugged his shoulders, then turned off the engine and opened the door. She followed him and walked beside him toward the gate that looked like it had stood there for decades, without anyone bothering to check up on it. They both could see the road running past it. From here on, there would be no buildings, no signs, and only the small notes on a napkin to guide them. Erin was first at the gate and pushed it open. Creaking of its hinges reminded her of old ghost stories she had heard as a child, about how the dead moaned and groaned in longing for the living. A chill crawled up her spine, and she sped up, immediately feeling Benjamin now pushing as well. They opened the gate as far as it went, then Erin got to work fastening it in position. "We can close it on our way down," she said, and could see the man nodding beside her. She looked up at the mountain once she finished and felt her knees going weak for a moment. All she could see were shrubs and dust, yet this feeling of something watching her suddenly seemed so real, so visceral, that Erin couldn't help but shrink back. This was a bad idea, part of her warned, and as she looked at her companion for today, she could see that he wasn't faring any better. His skin seemed strangely pale in the bright sun, and he was staring up toward the top of the mountain as well, searching for something, by the looks of it. "I think we should get back in the car," Erin warned, and could see the man nodding without looking back at her. This was a bad place, she thought. No wonder there were so many stories about it. The atmosphere here was just off. Somehow, she felt exposed and vulnerable. Erin rushed past her companion with quick steps and only felt relief once she managed to close the passenger door behind her. Benjamin wasn't much slower. She could see beads of sweat on his brow as he hopped into the car and slammed the door shut. "This doesn't feel good," Erin heard him whispering and nodded in response. Yeah, she knew what he was talking about. "Let's go up a bit further. If it gets worse, we can just turn around and drive back down, right?" Now he nodded, then gave her a soft smile as he started the engine. Erin remembered some of the stories she had heard last night. Headless bodies, evil ghosts, aliens, a curse. She would have never called herself a believer, but right now, in this atmosphere, she slowly had to admit that maybe sometimes things might actually be going on that could not be explained by science. The car set off, and she picked up the napkin again, just to give herself something to do. There were strange, tiny notes on there. Big rock, head left. Old tree, right. She relayed the instructions to Benjamin, who followed wordlessly. Half an hour, they just drove up. Their path led them along the side of the mountain and toward a place where jagged rocks seemed to take over the landscape. Only the atmosphere didn't get any less ominous. The small dried-out shrubs and stones along the way were getting even more sparse up here, while the mountain itself seemed to suck up the light of the bright sun. "This is a bad place," Erin mumbled, then felt Benjamin's eyes almost burrowing a hole into her. He could feel it too, she was sure. Still, as long as they were inside the car, they could drive off again. That was something she could cling to. Erin tried to steady her breathing as she watched the scenery pass by outside the window. They were high up already, higher than she had imagined. She could see the land down there, the tiny houses and streets. It looked almost peaceful from where she was right now. But even that view didn't manage to get her mind off the strange dread that seemed to follow them. Some of the dried-out shrubs rustled as they passed by. Others didn't. When she looked up the slope of the mountain, she thought she could see shadows moving behind the rocks. Even her companion felt it. She could see it clearly now. The excessive sweating, his eyes shooting from side to side every time they came close to a fork in the road. "Not far now." Erin tried to calm him down, and he gave her another weak smile. The map on the napkin showed her that there would only be one more landmark they had to look out for. A tree. Old and dead, with what seemed like blood on its bark. She told her driver that and could see him grimacing. How should he recognize such a tree? Well, they both got the answer in a matter of minutes. Up ahead, they could see old, finger-like branches sticking up into the air, and as soon as the thing came into view, Erin knew exactly what the old drunk had talked about. The grey and white bark seemed to glow in the sunlight, but there were spots all over it, getting more and more until it got to the base and the roots. They were blood red. Erin could feel the goosebumps breaking out all over her skin as she watched a car approaching this thing slowly. "I think that's the one," she whispered, and the man only nodded in silence. There was no way they could be at the wrong spot, yet Erin had to admit that she wouldn't have complained if the guy turned the car around and sped back down. But he didn't. They rolled on those last few steps and came to stop in front of the tree. "This is the spot." The words came out of her as Erin felt another chill. Not far behind the tree, she could see water running down a tiny brook. Yet, there was no grass growing there, no plant life or anything. It was all dead. "Maybe we should," she started, but the man cut her off without a single word. He was pointing toward the brook, and as Erin followed him with her eyes, she could see something that made her heart almost leap out of her chest. There, in the water, was a single rock that seemed to glow so much brighter than all the rest. It drew her attention, and Erin could feel her hand on the door release before she could even form another thought. Shit, no matter how wrong this place felt, there was gold out there, just a few steps away. It couldn't be that dangerous, could it? She heard the driver's side door opening and followed the man out. They were both almost running toward the small stream, now only looking at the glimmering rock in the sunlight. Benjamin got there first, pulled it out of the water, and held it high into the air. It was glowing. "So, how do we split it?" The question hadn't come up yet, at least not today, and Erin felt her companion's eyes wandering down to her. 50-50. No fucking around. She nodded, extended her hand, and the man gave her the stone. It felt just like the one in the bar she found after she touched it, heavier than she thought. "How much do you think this one's worth?" She could see him shaking his head in response. Erin herself had a rough idea about the price of gold right now, but they didn't even know how much of that nugget was stone. "I'll put it in my bag," she explained, then let the guy watch as she dropped the rock in her handbag. "There's more," she heard the man whisper while he pointed up the stream. Her eyes shot up again. And yeah, she could see them. Smaller and bigger spots in the river, glistening whenever the light touched them at the right angle. Erin could feel her heart racing. She didn't mind that her shoes were drenched or that the strange atmosphere was still all around her. Like excited children, they ran up the stream, picking small rocks from the water, giggling and chuckling all along. "How many have you got?" "5. I've got 3, but bigger ones." Erin was laughing and splashing around. The stream was full of them. What looked like every few steps one would stumble upon another nugget. She watched him race up ahead and followed shortly after. If he wanted to do more of the work, he could. He would split it in the end. And if he had any delusions about hiding something from her or changing the arrangement, well, she was prepared for that. Erin looked up and saw him follow the stream in between some massive rocks that blocked her view. If he tried to hide some rocks in places he thought she wouldn't find, he'd have another thing coming. For now, she could just get the easier ones and worry about how she could do the same later. "Found a big one," she heard him yelling and smiled. 3 tiny pebbles were glowing in the water. Erin picked them up, then took another few steps. Water was splashing up ahead between the rocks. He must have seen another giant one, she thought. Slowly, she waded up the river and looked for more glimmering spots in the water. 9 she had already found. It would give her enough money to take it easy far longer than those next few months. Maybe she could take an entire year off, travel without thinking of a new scheme for some time. Erin chuckled, then bowed down to pick up another small, glimmering pebble. But suddenly, couldn't see it anymore. It wasn't that the pebbles had disappeared. No. The water was getting darker. Erin looked up and froze. The whole stream was turning murky. "Benjamin?" she shouted. No response. She took a step back out of the water and could see red streaks in her white socks. A breeze blew by, carrying with it a scent she'd rather forget. Blood. "Benjamin?" she repeated, only this time her voice almost broke. Something was splashing around up there, behind the rocks. Was it a prank? No. Her hand was shaking as it dove into her bag, pulling out the small revolver. Something bad was going on. "Benjamin!" Erin called out again, now staring up at the place where she had last seen him. He wasn't answering. The smell of blood was getting worse and worse. She could feel her legs almost buckling and took a step back. The sound of someone or something splashing around up there was getting louder and louder. Erin raised her gun and aimed at the big boulders. "Whoever you are, piss off!" she howled. I could even hear her voice cracking herself. More splashing of water, this time coming closer. Someone was up there with Benjamin, had hurt him, maybe killed him. But she wouldn't be so easy to take. Erin took another step back as the splashing reached the edge of the big rocks. She could see it, blood getting sprayed out and into the water. The whole brook was now turning red. She took aim again and turned the cylinder of the gun so that it would stop at a filled chamber. This wasn't a joke. Erin felt her heart beating up in her throat. Whoever was up there wasn't answering. She heard them splashing, then could see something at the edge of the boulder. A shadow, she thought, and almost pulled the trigger. No, they were testing her, trying to find out what she would do. Erin stepped back, more quickly now. She was walking down the slope along the brook and only dared to look behind her once. The car was still a way off. Shit, she cursed. "Come out!" Erin howled, still aiming for the edge of the boulder. The stench of blood was everywhere now. Its metallic, coppery scent seemed to fill her mouth and nose. Erin heard a wet plop from above, then almost froze as a figure shot out from behind the boulder. Her finger found the trigger 3 times. She shot at the shadow flying down, hit it once, and could see it crash into the brook, splashing its bloody water everywhere. A Erin was screaming and staring at the body. She knew the jacket, pants and shoes. Benjamin. His corpse was slowly rolling down the slope, bleeding heavily. Not from the gunshot, but the missing head. Something cackled up above behind the boulders. Erin turned and ran. Her gun fell and the handbag slipped from her shoulder. She was crying, racing down the slope as the noise of something splashing through the brook reached her ears. It was coming after her. She couldn't turn around, didn't want to see it. The car, it was up ahead. She needed to reach it, needed to get away from here. Erin crossed the brook and could hear the thing behind her speeding up. There was no way she would make it. Her instincts howled at her. It was quicker than her. She closed her eyes and tried to speed up. The thing in her back was splashing through the water, gaining on her. With a howl, she jumped the last few steps, crashed into the side of the car, and grabbed hold of the door handle. There, in the reflection, she could see it. A grey-skinned figure was coming toward her. It didn't look human, nor like any animal she had ever seen. With long arms and legs, it raced toward her on all fours. Erin screamed and ripped open the door, losing sight of it at that moment. She needed to get into the car, lock it, drive. Erin tried to dive into it, but something stopped her. A hand with far too long fingers grabbed her by the neck before she could jump. She felt it, pulling her back, lifting her up as she kicked and struggled. The fingers seemed like marble, ice cold even in the hot sun. Erin screamed and howled and tried to get out of its grasp. The pressure around her neck was getting too much. She felt her arms and legs jerking as the thing yanked her back. One last time, she looked down at the car. In the reflection, she could see it, standing behind her, lifting her up with ease. This was its territory, the monster that lived in this place. Erin cried out and felt her neck snapping, plunging her into eternal darkness.